First story here, as I teased, Mike Simpson's response to House Speaker vote. This comes by the East Idaho News by Logan Ramsey. As we discussed last week, Idaho Congressman Mike Simpson refused to vote for Representative Jim Jordan for House Speaker. This turn of events frustrated many people in Idaho and even caused Dorothy Moon, the chair of the Republican Party of Idaho, to call him out. All that said, last week, Congressman Simpson wrote an op-ed explaining why he refused to vote for Representative Jim Jordan as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. In it, Simpson said that Jordan has repeatedly taken positions against Idaho's best interest, such as voting against crucial funding for the Idaho National Laboratory and Farm Bill. Simpson also said that Jordan voted against delisting the gray wolf, which in his word has had a positive impact on Idaho, and against the Farm Worker Force Monetization Act, which many Idaho farmers and producers support. Simpson said he could not vote for a speaker who he does not think supports Idaho. He also regularly took shots in his op-ed at Dorothy Moon, one of them being saying, quote, "Perhaps Chairman Dorothy Moon has not lived in Idaho long enough to understand how important things like agriculture, delisting wolves, our national military, and Idaho's National Laboratory, or INL, are for our state," end quote. Now, with that said, I would highly recommend you go read his entire op-ed, or I actually discovered this when I was doing research for the podcast and this and stuff. You can take the Google Assistant and tell it. I'm not going to say the word because I'll mess with your phone, but you can actually tell it when you're on an article to read the article to you, and then you can listen to it as a podcast, and the voice to AI transcription works actually pretty well. Anywho, with that said, kind of breaking down, here are the main 6 points that I pulled out of his op-ed that he did not, or Mr. Simpson, did not vote for Jim Jordan for House Speaker. The first being that Jordan voted against the Idaho National Laboratory's funding, which he says creates thousands of jobs and generates over $120 million for Idaho's state and local tax revenue. The second reason that Mike Simpson did not vote for Jim Jordan was that Jordan voted against the Payments in Lieu of Taxes, or PILT program, which provides funding for rural counties that have 94% federal lands for things such as local schools, police departments, transportation, infrastructure, and health services. Number 3, that Jordan voted against funding for wildlife suppression activities. 4, that Jordan voted against funding for the infrastructure at Gowan Field and Mountain Home Air Force Base. 5, Jordan voting against legislation to delist the gray wolf. And lastly, number 6, Jordan voting against the Farm Bill. So coming into the commentary here, those that listened last week will remember, not very happy with Mike Simpson. We'll put it that way. I wanted him to vote for Jordan. And I had to very much slim down a lot of things listening to and reading the op-ed that he gave and kind of just giving a background on each one of these. I tried to write them in the way that Mike Simpson presented them so I wouldn't be contorting his words for those positions. But I do kind of want to rebuttal on those a little bit and have John join me kind of going through each one of those. The first one for the INL National Laboratory. And for most of these, when it comes to funding, and for the life of me, I cannot remember him. There was a gentleman, he's one of our Idaho senators here in the state. He actually posted a tweet that's kind of relevant on this, that just because someone votes no on a funding thing doesn't mean they're not for funding for that thing. Sometimes that's because the funding is incomplete, there isn't proper allocation of where funds are going, and there's just these blank checks being written and you don't want to vote for it. Just because you don't vote for certain funding doesn't mean you're not in support of it. So just because Mr. Simpson here is saying that Jordan isn't in favor of Idaho's National Laboratory Bill or whatever for more funding there, it might be of a different reason. Now, with that said, counter argument, I don't know where, maybe Jordan did. But I can say overall with these funding things, I could say that there's a case to be made. The federal government is spending way too much lately. And Jordan may be looking at the perspective of, does this place really need this? Is it going to die if we don't give this funding? Well, no, INL has a lot of money from private industry going into it as well. Because if Idaho's National Laboratory there for nuclear does well for the whole industry on what it develops and improves and what happens for regulators and different things. So they're not going to be short on money on that. What is your perspective on that first one?
So we talked a lot about the position of the ultra-conservative caucus, whatever they're calling themselves.
I think it's the Freedom Caucus, right?
Freedom Caucus, thank you. We talked about the perspective of the Freedom Caucus last time. where they want to get rid of pork from bills. And this is one where I could see this being an omnibus spending package for laboratories nationwide, or we're going to have laboratories and other stuff in this bill. Like, when I, and this is true for all of these things, when I hear people talking about, well, he voted against this and he voted for that, I kind of go, yeah, but we don't have single issue bills. So I don't know what else was in the bill that he actually voted against. So,
right.
I don't know. What does this have to do with much of anything? The funny thing is the guy that has ended up being voted in, Mike Johnson, he seems to be even more a hardliner about reducing government size and reducing government spending. So I have a hard time believing a lot of these points because they're all with regard to funding, and the new speaker is going to be pushing to reduce funding everywhere. So, I mean, yeah, cool that Simpson has reasons that he didn't vote for Jim Jordan.
Well, he has reasons, but part of me wonders if this was a trying to save his image type of find reasons. Because if he already knew these reasons, it wouldn't have been quick for when this was all happening on Twitter for him to say, well, I can't vote for Jim Jordan, X, Y, and Z in some very quick publication. It wouldn't have been hard, or some interview or something, right? He could have instantly just been like, this is why, boom, 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 we're not. No, he took an extra week after it's kind of not as much relevant, right? And then comes back and says, okay, now these are my reasons. Now that you've had time to justify, possibly, why you didn't vote that way.
Yeah, well, and his reasons don't make sense given the guy that he ultimately voted for, because the new speaker is going to be just as hardlined about reducing federal spending as anybody else. So why didn't you vote against this guy?
Right. Plus, I think a lot of this, and the more that I've watched politics and the more that I've tried to learn and understand how it works, because it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's part of the things that govern our lives. Politics is the interaction between people in public spheres. That a lot of stuff sometimes is about image. That I think Mr. Simpson has some more squishy people, maybe. That he is trying to not lose in the fray, and him voting for a known very conservative person in the House that everyone knows. He's, had a ton of interviews. A lot of people know the name Jim Jordan in politics. Rather than this gentleman, what was his name again? I'm sorry. Perfect example, right? I've forgotten his name.
Yeah, no, nobody knew about this. Mike Johnson.
He just came out of left field, and so he gives Simpson like, okay, cool, I can vote, and later I can say, look, I voted for a conservative guy, and he did all these conservative things, right? But it saves him face that then with all of his squishy people, he's like, well, I didn't know he was going to go that way, and blah, 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 blah. He just came out of left field, and I just voted for it because it's what the party was recommending, and so I went for it, and then he can have his cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I know there's also a group of people in the House who have loyalty to former Speaker Mike McCarthy.
Okay.
And so there was a group of Republicans who were aiding Mike McCarthy in stalling voting for a new speaker or voting in a new speaker.
Trying to make it look worse or something?
Well, with the intention of re-electing McCarthy as the speaker, because they were going to go, yeah, we didn't vote for him. We need somebody. Let's bring back the old guy. He at least got things done.
Right. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a tactic that was going on, but I feel like that would have been, from what I saw, unrealistic from them to think, because of the fact that everything that I read, McCarthy was just like, I don't want this anymore. You guys squabble. Like, a parent that's sitting there and you have the two childs that are fighting, and it's just like, I'm done. Let me be free. I'm going to walk out. That's the impression I got from McCarthy.
I have a hard time. I would have a hard time believing that from McCarthy.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's just our opinions, and everyone's got one.
With that said, I really, for everyone listening, I can I sense maybe a little bit of screaming. I really would have liked to deep dive a little bit more in each one of these points and really pull it out and do some fact checking and some deeper diving into it and stuff. But one, operating on a 4-day week for making the podcast and different stuff. Granted, if you guys want us to go into this more, please feel free to reach out to me. If I get enough people, like with any of these stories, if you guys want us to go more into depth on it, want me to do more research, please let me know. I would love to. It's just a time allocation. If enough people are interested, then I will totally do it. But I have to be wise with the limited time I have when making these episodes. But with that said, he did give his reasons. But in any case, we do have a speaker now, which is very nice. When I was writing this, I don't think we had one.
No, it happened. It happened super suddenly.
Yes. And we'll see what the future holds. God governs in the affairs of men, Benjamin Franklin.